Welcome to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions. Your host tonight is the author of the Pro-Black Compendium and Zuberi and the Maroons of Ma'at, the Pan-African Nationalist, Oni. Oni, what are we discussing tonight?
All right, peace, family. Today we're going to finish off Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for federated state by, like I say, the misceganist Cheikh A. Diop. So far, the book is really pleasant, and as you can see, it only took me, let's say, so far, you want to say around 6 hours to get through 90% of the book. So, there's like no excuse for us to not be engaging the literature of the past, particularly from those of our predecessors who were authentically committed to our race. Now, unfortunately, with the misogyny, that does bring into question, that matter. But, outside of that, you could see that this was truly a brother who, should I even say brother, right? But this was truly a predecessor who really wanted Africa to be uplifted and united, right? But here's, and again, like this, that's one of the issues I want to say with misogyny, to be honest, because it's, Martin Delany said, and I mean, it's probably better to just read it in the Pro-Black Compendium, but Martin Delany did point out that your personal relationships are can be a basis for judging you as an individual, and anyone whose personal relationships, include stepping outside of their race, it comes into question, how devoted and dedicated they are to their people. So let's go to the conclusion, though. To this point, I have traced the general outline of industrialization in the absolute without bringing out the rhythm to be adopted so that it might be realized, nor establishing any close correlation between it and actual present possibilities. It goes without saying that there has been certain sporadic industrial accomplishments at various spots of the continent, but there is no overall plan. For reasons easy to see. Okay. There could be none prior to political unification or at least establishment of multilateral agreements. However that may be, even such limited industrialization cannot be crowned with success unless there be participation of the state and the people as a whole. So investment funds. In all that has gone before, we have tried to show, contrary to current assumptions, that the continent does have an industrial destiny. We have especially underlined the fact that the economic and industrial future of Mali, that is, the old Senegal-Sudan Federation, will necessarily be prosperous. Whatever pessimistic prophets may say, if industrializing efforts resolutely take the direction we have indicated, we must note, how having made this overall absolute appraisal, the real investment means available now to prepare so vast an enterprise. Where would risk capital come from? There are 5 sources for it. So I want to say, just quickly, here he's saying, look, real talk, you don't have political unity. What I'm saying doesn't even, it won't manifest. And what happens is that you see that these don't manifest, and as we don't have this political unity, and multilateral agreements are still being debated in a sense, investment funds. Investment funds is an important concept here, because what it highlights is that a lot of this industrialization cost, it's expensive. Industrialization is expensive. It's not necessarily something that an individual will undertake on a grand scale, unless that individual is pretty damn wealthy. Nations, which again, like I say, they get their resources from taxation, among other means. and they, in that stuff, taxation, tariffs, that kind of stuff, which is just another form of taxation, but they get there. I mean, so it behooves us that to want to industrialize, to want to technologize, so on and so forth. If we want to do this, we have to assume power from the state. Now, of course, if you want to do it across Africa, again, that might be more of a Pan-African enterprise, but you have to start somewhere. We go back to Carter G. Woodson and his comment towards African people, which is that we tend to not want to start small and get large. We kind of want to just start large, and that's not, and as you can see, that hasn't come to pass. And unfortunately, if you were a student, regardless of if you would call it pessimistic, if you're a student of Africa, you'll see that political unity is not around the corner unless and until we work toward it. But we're going to continue reading. At the beginning, we would have to adopt NEP, New Economic Policy, adopted by Lenin in 1921, of our own. Repeating this old Russian economic experiment will have to be surrounded by the greatest precautions. At the very least, right from the start, companies would have to be jointly owned and operated with the state's share constantly increasing. Within the framework we have traced, we now have to define areas of investment for private companies. Instead of letting them come into the country with their teams of technicians to evaluate its treasures and then freely select among them what they think would prove most lucrative for their investment, the state, basing its decisions on the need of its own industrialization plan, must put a brake on such anarchy by holding the reins of economic development. So of course, like I said, this is the miscegenation right here, But I mean, it's not the worst form of miscegenation, getting insight onto economic development from your enemies, if you will. But it's not the worst form of miscegenation. But you can see kind of where it is. Basically, it's inviting foreign investors into the country, but also progressively taking from their shares. So it's jointly operated, but you're progressively buying shares into this company to the point where eventually you will then own the company that was itself lucrative and itself was focusing on the industrialization of the country. So basically, you see what that is. I mean, it's a risky, as he puts it, it's a risky undertaking. 2, for hard currencies and machinery, we would exchange our precious metals, gold, silver, and platinum, what is left of gold, of old gold, and the ores of the Bambouk and the Faleme, the Ngalam in Senegal and Mali, the gold of Ghana, Cameroon, Zaire, the Ivory Coast, Guinea, the gold of Central and East Africa and Rhodesia, and the Union of South Africa, once the continent has been unified on the basis of our own supremacy. The same applies to the diamonds of Guinea, Cameroon, Angola, Zaire, Tanzania, and South Africa. So this is just basically bartering. We want currency, we want machinery, we have metals, gold, silver. Again, like it's not even too attractive, to be honest. But he's probably just exploring the different options. Number 3, we would sell our excess strategic raw materials as long as our own industry could not absorb them. Manganese from Zaire, Ghana, Ivory Coast, South Africa, and Cameroon, tantalum of Nigeria, titanium of Senegal, and the coastal areas, cobalt from Zaire, South African and Mozambique, chromium, copper from the Shaba and Zambia, uranium from Zaire, Cameroon, and Central Africa, vanadium and cadmium from Southwest Africa, bauxite from Guinea and Ghana, on and on. All of these non-ferrous ores would in the first stage be exchanged for establishing factories of various kinds for machinery and for machine tools with a view to later industrialization. To the above must also be added the seed oils of all of Africa, especially Senegal, the phosphates of Senegal and Mali, the hevia of the forested regions, cacao, coffee, sugar cane, tea, bananas, and other tropical fruits such as cola nuts. Finally, the iron-bearing ores themselves of Guinea, Sierra Leone, Mauritania, and elsewhere. A systematic survey of the continent, and Mali in particular, should yield a definitive list of the treasures to be mined, so that once and for all we might get a picture of what industrialization can be like. So, again, this is another one of those barters. Instead of metals, these are going to be minerals. Yeah, and this is something that we don't fully understand, that the world operates, like white people do operate on exploitation, and white people operate on exploitation. So if you are, so they would give you industrialization for what would otherwise be a steal, you know. So for instance, Garvey was able to purchase ships because he overpaid for like rundown ships. You get what I'm saying? He overpaid for rundown ships. So you can, I mean, and it doesn't have to be rundown ships, because he could also have paid for brand new ships, just overpaying for it. And that's really the way how white people treat you in this economic order, where they kind of charge you a lot more than they would charge themselves. But they would still, like, if you are that gullible, if you're that desperate, that you could actually walk away with something nice. So, you know, they could like say, oh yeah, well, for all these bananas, you know what I mean, for this whole banana field, I'll give you so on and so forth. So I mean, that's a possibility. It's not the most attractive, you know. In our minds, we would prefer to just industrialize on our own. You know, we would just build machinery on our own, you know, with a population that, you know, that hasn't really been involved in machinery. We want to just do it overnight. That's good in your imagination. It's good in your imagination. It's not necessarily too realistic, you know, because but I mean, if it could be done, then do it. But it's just not something that's, you know, it's just not entirely practical. In the last analysis, the most important investment is of a human character. It is the collective will of the people to serve their countries. The establishment of a collective public manpower pool is possible only if none feels frustrated. Before that can be achieved, it would be necessary that through judicious pairing, salaries paid for political positions be brought down to the range of workers' wages. So he's saying these politicians should be paid along the range of workers. I don't even know where he's coming at from this, but a collective manpower pool is kind of like what the sister, I can't remember her name, but I think it's like Chiambori or something. But her, you know, who was part of the African Union at once upon a time, she's now trying to collect, you know, intel on our own people, you know, to have that public manpower pool. So it's not, you know, and that's really one of those things that, like that would be in essence, you know, oh yeah, we don't need to trade stuff. We already have the people. But the only question is, do we have the people, and are they ready and willing to work? And that's the big question. And so here's another one. Loans could then be made against international investments, but they must never go high so as to risk becoming a delusion. Before everything else, we must help ourselves. What is termed aid to the undeveloped countries might for a long time be used all too easily as blackmail. There are certain American industrialists who try to prevail. Okay, so I just want to go over loans. Yeah, so loans is another one of those things that you do not really want to engage in. If you remember from Marcus Garvey, Message to the People, he's like, whoa, pretty much avoid doing loans. But I mean, you know, even Nyerere did it, and I don't completely agree with what he did, but you know, at some points you have to realize that you're in a predicament that needs, for lack of a better word, capital, or that needs, like if you really truly want to industrialize, you have to understand, as the African proverb goes, for every joy there's a price to be paid. You know, something has to give. Okay, if people are trying to exploit you, or even if people are trying to have reciprocity, you have to understand that, you know, the means towards that end are limited. But let's go. There are certain American industrialists who try to prevail on their government to aid only those underdeveloped countries that agree to limit their own emergence. Look at that. At all times, you would have to be ready to refuse any aid that carried strings with it, however unbinding these might appear to be. Africa must win and hold in a large part its own domestic market, one of the greatest in the world. A whole book should be devoted to the study of this market with a view of organizing the economies of African states. So scientific research. Basic research will always remain essentially a university concern. Therefore, right at the start, with full objectivity, the universe would be rightfully entitled to claim the required funds for the construction of high-energy accelerators, for example, to contribute to the further elucidation of elemental particles, behavior, matter at high levels of energy, and other such problems. Applied research must be shared as quickly as possible with specialized institutes under university supervision. If we wish to see the African nation everyone is talking about these days adapt itself to the needs of the modern technical world, we would have from its very beginning to provide those technical institutions that guarantee the life of a modern nation. We should forthwith create the following institutes. So look at this right here. So he's talking about universities in essence. He's going to call them institutes, clearly. But this is what I outline in my book, The Book of Power. The idea is that you want our people to have these technical institutions, okay, these universities. And right now, at this moment, we don't. And generally speaking, we don't in anything, in a sense. I mean, he's probably going to say, as you can scroll down, you can see University of Dakar. But again, it's not at the level it should be, and it's not as universal as it should be. Like compared to your opposition, you are pretty much not going through. You're not going through your own educational system. Like most of the leaders of Africa, with I think one exception, went to school in like some low grade university in either Europe or Africa. Europe or America, and I want to say, or like outside of Africa. And I think maybe there was some that went to Africa, and I think it was maybe like the Tanzanian one, and of course he was doing pretty damn well for Africa. But let's go. An Institute of Nuclear Chemistry and Physics to be split in two later, if need be. An Electronics Institute, an Aeronautics and Astronautics Institute, an Institute of Applied Chemistry for Industry and Agriculture, Organic Synthesis, Metallurgy, Mineral Chemical Industry, and so on. An Institute of Tropical Agronomy and Biochemistry, Soil Study, Fertilizers, Extraction of Vegetable Products, with a view to finding industrial or pharmaceutical applications for certain flora. An Institute of Health, specializing in the study of tropical diseases. The University of Dakar would thus become one of the main training centers of African key personnel. So African key personnel. I think it's actually appropriate time to give you guys this book that I'm working on. So this book that I worked on. The book is called The Book of Power, and what we discuss in there is Boko Waset Nakero. So it's this idea that you build, like Boko would be, you build preparatory schools, okay, or preparatory communities, right, that would then go Waset. Waset would be then like the university with all these institutes in it, right, and then from those institutes you would have Keru, which would be the key personnel. So this is actually one of the Pan-African nationalist concepts that we have to understand in context. And if we don't understand this, if we do not understand that we need to have these three steps in order, because even right here, you see this Institute of Nuclear Chemistry, when you leave out Boko, when you leave out the preparatory school, the question is, who will be ready for these? Who will be ready to go to an electronics institute? Who? You understand? You have to undergo a deep level of education before you even go into these electronics institutes, before you even go into the Aeronautics and Astronautics Institute. And if that education itself isn't towards Pan-African nationalism, isn't preparing you with the language that will be taught at these institutes, okay? If the language, for instance, if these institutes are in French, right, then the key personnel will speak French. If these institutes are in Swahili, however, then the key personnel will be Swahili, will speak Swahili. However, if these institutes are in Swahili, right, if there's no preparatory school for students to study Swahili, they can't even go into the school. You understand how important language is. And language is very important, but preparatory schools are where you would learn language. It's a complicated scheme, but you have to say to yourself, What am I to do? What am I to do? I mean, what is it that we can do? And that what you can do fundamentally is do Boko. Boko is easier to do. If you want to do Boko, however, you want to get the Book of Power. So if you want to have a community center and a preparatory school and prepare people to, in order to even have these institutes to be functional and accommodating the African population, you want to do Boko. And if you want to do Boko, you have the Book of Power as your first reading. All right. So we're going to go into the advertisement for it. While I take some.
Okay, so I know books. All right. So let me tell you about a book.
Tell you.
All right.
Check it.
So the goal and objective is to be selective, electing for knowledge with the black directive, checking sources, heritage, and legacies, with the brilliance to defeat our nemesis. The Book of Power, so aptly named, esteemed and famed for informing the brain and doing the same as the ancestors before us. Sankofa, that's the life chorus. Wisdom is the key against dangers. Either change the leaders or lead the changes. We are due in Africa with no strangers. Do you hear us? Okay, hold on. We can't continue to beat the second fiddle. African power is the end of this riddle. Let's build a nation that likes which never resisted. The motto heretofore, we persisted. Better, we resisted. Best, we building. We'll raise the roof and break through the ceiling. Peeling away the change we were given to stop just surviving, start thriving and living. Africa's about to host superpowers. China and US back up the time's hours. No one can be free without freeing themselves. But freedom is shown and owned on bookshelves. The Book of Power, a key for liberation. There's no domination where there's education, because ignorance is man's main weakness. All are exploited if we don't teach this. Then the pages of sages, kings and queens, Akampong, Delaney, Dessalines, Nyere, Garvey and Zinga and Cooks. 500 pages surpassing most books. The task is told to bring up a continent. You will hold the tone for the confident. Have some pride and push forward your chest. Your leaders are reading one of the best. The book has science, covers violence, self-reliance, and does away with silence. The time has come for the work to get done and build up a land that'll be second to none. We'll organize, technologize, strategize a new Africa before our eyes, and blackness will be the complexion we see anytime we envision what it means to be free. So come join minds, read what is written. Here be solutions, no longer hidden. Nothing works in theory, all that works, works and works. So it's time to put ourselves first. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Book of Power. So the Book of Power can be purchased on Amazon. Just click on the link below. Alright? Send me tap. Tulende ma'a, tushinde is fat. Tulende ma'a, tushinde is fat. Tulende ma'a, tushinde is fat. Tap.
Alright, peace family. So we're gonna go to comparative. So like I said, I encourage you to really invest yourself into reading the literature that can push us forward and make this sort of literature more practical. But comparative production figures. So production of electrical energy in the United States, 1975, was approximately 2 trillion or 2,000 billion kilowatt hours, in contrast to that of the USSR, which was 1,038 billion kilowatt hours. Worldwide steel production was estimated at 705 million metric tons, of which 132 million were produced in the United States alone. So the United States is building a lot of steel. And everybody wants steel. All right. In order to build and put into operation a steelworks complete with rolling mills with a capacity of 4 to 5 million metric tons per year, an African country would have to invest 8 to 10 billion French francs in 1974, or approximately 1.6 billion to $2 billion. So if you just want to produce 5 million metric tons per year of steel, it would cost $2 billion. Okay, and that's just to make 5 million, and that's not even like close to the 705 million that the world produces already. French governmental foreign aid to the French-speaking states of Black Africa and the Indian Ocean in 1977, so this is like 1977 at least, was estimated at 2.6 billion francs, or approximately $530 million. So to all the French aid was only $5 to $30 million. So you see, A federated Black Africa has the potential to become both industrially and politically as powerful as either the USSR or the United States. So, this should be a reasonable thing to assume because the United States is the biggest, the most populated white country, and it's at 300 million people. And then while Africa is about 3 times as much as that. But also bear in mind that also means that America is actually pretty huge if a third of its population is, if it represents about a third, if it has about a third of the population. Well, how do I say this? If its population is about a third of Africa's. But let's look at this right here, just to pay attention. 2,000 billion kilowatt hours. Actually, I wanted to go back and see how much the other one was, but don't worry about it. Let's see. 14 steps to African unity. Let's go. In conclusion, we can specify the following 15 essential points as basic principles for concrete action. So 1, to restore consciousness of our historic unity. 2, to work for linguistic unification on a territorial and continental scale with a single African cultural and governmental language superseding all others. The European languages then, whichever they may be, would remain in use or be relegated to the status of foreign language taught in secondary school. So I want to actually, let's go over this. Let's see how the Book of Power can help you with these 14 steps to African unity. All right? And maybe I might do this again for a separate podcast or something. But let's go. To restore consciousness of our historical unity. If you want that, and I can advise you where to look, pretty much. If you want that, to restore the consciousness of our historical unity, open the Pro-Black Compendium. Okay? We're going to give you history. We're going to give you a bunch of history books. We're going to give you we're going to give you a historical insight onto the historic unity. And the historic unity does go back into the Sahel region, the Great Lakes. We go back to like we go back to the different civilizations of Africa. So definitely, if you know, I could probably do a separate podcast that really details this, but I want you to realize that if any other book you want to go into the Pro-Black Compendium, okay? To work for linguistic unification, I already said this, you want to adopt Boko Waset Nakeru as found in the Book of Power. To raise our national tongues to the rank of governmental languages used in Parliament and in the writing of laws. Language would no longer stand in the way of electing to Parliament or other offices a person from the grassroots who might be unlettered. Now this is actually a pretty curious thing. I don't know why you would want someone unlettered in the Parliament, in the sense of, you know, the Parliament would be letters. I don't know why you'd even want a Parliament, to be honest, because that's like a Eurasian style of government in a sense. But you know, all that said, again, this goes back to language and Boko Waset Nakeru. You know, you truly do, and some people might say, well, why would you not want somebody unlettered? Well, because it doesn't make sense. You're going by the Kemetu model, right? The Kemetu model, which was you had Africans who let's just say they studied before they could be administrators. Okay, so the idea of being unlettered and then being responsible for writing laws doesn't make sense. Unless you're saying unlettered in the language, in the Eurasian languages, which, you know, but again, you're going to get rid of these. You don't want these Eurasian languages in government anyway, so it doesn't matter. Like I can't write in French. I don't know how to read French. I don't know how to write French, but it doesn't matter because I don't engage in French. You get what I'm saying? Or I can't write in, German or something. You know, like it doesn't matter. So I don't actually understand this point. You could actually just nut this one off. To work out an effective form of representation for the female sector of the nation. That's beautiful and brilliant. But again, I would go to, so that's where I would go back to the Pro-Black Compendium. In the Pro-Black Compendium, I list you 10 warrior kings, but I also list you 10 warrior queen mothers. You know, I also, when I go over the different authors and different, like I do the gender balance, you know, so that you can get a fair representation. And even in the Book of Power, when I give you the top 3 orators, you know, top 3 top 3 orators that you can listen to, I give you like the top 3 male orators, I give you the top 3 female orators. So you know, that a part of you know, like I don't even understand why discrimination of women happens, but it does happen. So, but I don't think that it's something that we, as Oncobia, would even like promote. Let's see. 5, to live African federal unity. The immediate unification of French and English-speaking Africa alone can act as a test for this. It is the only way to start Black Africa along the slope of its historic destiny once and for all. To wait while invoking secondary considerations is to allow the various states time to harden in their shapes and become unsuited to federation, as in Latin America. So this already passed. To oppose, it's already passed, and this is why this idea you can't keep up with it. You can't keep up with it, and it didn't even matter because it wasn't a good idea to begin with. It wasn't a good idea to begin with, but like what the methodology would have to be is illuminated in the Book of Power. You want to do Boko Waset Nakedo. Anything else is not going to work. Even in like for instance, one of the federations that we all know of is the American Federation. The American Federation was a series of colonies that were not federally united. They first attempted a confederation after, and that failed pretty quickly. The federation more so comes about organically, or not organically, but it comes about through what I would call a Boko Waset Nakedo situation. So you already have models of political unity, political federations that come about, but they don't come about the ways that we like. What Cheikh A here articulates is more of a lazy federation. But we're gonna keep going. To suppose out of hand any idea of creating white states anywhere in Black Africa, no matter where the idea comes from. To oppose out of hand, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You don't want to have white states. That I don't even know if anybody is, like, any African is looking for white states. To make sure our constitution is so written that no industrial bourgeoisie can come into being. This would prove that we are truly socialists by preventing in advance one of the fundamental ills of capitalism. Who today would oppose a preventive measure of this sort against a class that does not even exist in Africa? So yeah, so this is like I said, more like from the miscegenation thing. I do want to say, when it comes to constitution writing, the Book of Power has several constitutions to prevent, to make sure that no industrial bourgeoisie. One of the constitutions that I like is the IT Constitution. Oh, look at that! There's a stain over here. The IT Constitution, and in the IT Constitution, you will see that they prohibited white folk from owning property, which is like, you know, it's like these two into one, you know. As far as a bourgeoisie, again, this is just like, this is kind of just like the miscegenation talking, if you will. To create a powerful state industry giving primacy to industrialization, development, and mechanization of agriculture. So to create a powerful state industry giving primacy to industrial, yeah, we want this. That's why I put in the Book of Power, because you're not going to have industrialization without education. You're not going to have it. It doesn't. You're not going to have it, even if you were to purchase it. It would be to your undoing. You know, you want people, because again, if you purchase it from foreigners, you have to have people fluent in these foreign languages. Like if China comes along and says, okay, we'll do some industrializing here, right? You have to understand Mandarin. You understand? Or that Chinese person has to understand your language, whatever it may be. You know, for us, I would say Kiankobia, but you know, if we're being realistic and saying, hey, you know what, I mean, I don't really see it as realistic, but if we're like, wherever you go, wherever the Chinese go, unless they speak the local languages, like the industrialization and development won't even happen. Like they will have the industries, but then they can't run it. You see what I'm saying? To create a powerful modern army possessing an air force and endowed with a civic education that would make it unlikely to indulge in Latin American type pushies. I don't know what pushy is. I don't care. But I mean, I probably, you know, from context clues, you can probably tell that it's you know, internal conflict. Again, this modern army and all that, and unlikely to indulge in these things. That's, again, you go back to the Book of Power to study that kind of stuff. To create the technical institutes without which a modern state cannot exist, nuclear physics, chemistry, electronics, aeronautics, applied chemistry, and so on. Again, Book of Power. To reduce luxurious living standards and judiciously equalize salaries in such a way that political positions are comparable to workers' jobs. Again, this is not really a step to African unity. This is just him, promoting socialism in a sense. I'm not necessarily against socialism per se. I'm not, but the luxurious living standard. What people have to understand is that was in Africa long before white people were, and I'm not to say that Africa is such a perfect example, of city states, but because obviously that those communities fell. The thing is that this luxurious living standard is not necessarily a negativity. Now, I don't necessarily have myself a luxurious living standard, even if I could afford it, or even though I could afford it. So I'm not particularly saying, hey, go live that luxurious living standard. But this is more or less like just socialist propaganda, just socialism, quasi Christianity. I guess the guy's a Muslim, so maybe a little bit of that, but just this idea that it's better to not spend on yourself, if you will, or when it's not necessarily like really something that correlates to unity. It doesn't really correlate to African unity. Like if you, like, for instance, a political position is in fact a position, if done right, more deserving of a higher salary, if you will, because if done right, you're doing for the whole state as opposed to just a small sector of the state, So your position is actually, if done right, would be more meaningful, Like you see the survey that Cheikh A does in regards to the economic potentiality of certain fields. Like, that is more involved than just being in one of those fields. And not just that, but this job, but that survey and studying that survey and weighing it against other surveys and so on and so forth, that would create many of these jobs. Whereas this job does not really create, this job only creates one job. So it's really, the trouble with us as a people is that we got caught up into the socialist rhetoric, and that socialist rhetoric, is not, cannot be the end all. It's not. It's out of place. It's just out of place in terms of real thorough analysis. And again, I don't blame Diop because he doesn't have the Book of Power, obviously. But you could get the Book of Power, so it's okay. All right. To organize production cooperatives made up of volunteers owning adjacent fields. To organize production cooperatives made up of volunteers owning adjacent fields in order to mechanize and modernize agriculture and permit large-scale production. So, yes, again, volunteers owning adjacent fields. Okay, yeah. So this is interesting. It's pretty much just saying, cooperative economics to, modernize, like pretty much sharing, let's say, resources towards agriculture. And that's actually a good method. I think Nyerere adopted something along these lines. It was pretty, it worked. But again, Nyerere also adopted a little more into the deep socialist kind of theory, and it failed miserably. So this kind of stuff, cooperatives where you would in fact share the mechanized, to share the mechanization, could work kind of like sharing the tools. I don't really necessarily have a rake or whatever, or I don't have a shovel, but I can borrow it from my neighbor, kind of thing, but just bigger than a shovel, obviously, a tractor or something. But that's fine. That's I don't even know if anybody opposes that. But let's go. To create to create model state farms with a view to broadening the technical and social experiences of still ungrouped individual farmers, peasants, countryside. To create model state farms with this view of broadening the technical and social experiences of still ungrouped individual farmers, or you call them peasants, countryside collectivization will meet with 1,000 times less resistance among us than it did in European countries for all the reasons the author has previously induced in pre-colonial black Africa. Okay? So this is state farms. He's saying white people kind of resisted it, but black folk might not necessarily resist it. And that's what I would agree with that as well. To repopulate Africa in proper time, I'll try to do my part. All right. To carry out with conviction. So I don't know why he says 14 steps, but he has 15. But to carry out with conviction a policy of full employment in order progressively to eliminate the material dependence of certain social categories. So let's see what this says. It will be noted that these 15 points were the essential ones of the program of BMS. So that's the Bloc des Masses Sénégalais, Senegal, and the FNS, Front National Senegalese. So he's just talking about these points inside of Senegal. Like I said, he really focused on Senegal, and he's saying that they pretty much. But let's see what this one actually means, because they carry out with the conviction a policy of full employment in order to so full employment is again like that's something that the political body will have to do, and that's something that we're right now. This is why I say change the leaders and lead the changers, because essentially the leaders, like when it comes to employment, you want the leaders to create employment for the people. I mean, you do want some individuals to do it, but it's not always going to be the case that individuals can readily do it. But all right, that's actually pretty much it. This is the appendix. Let me see how long it is. It looks pretty good, but instead of me reading it to you, guess what? You can read it yourself. I have it available in the Discord. You can download this. You can download these books. Just come to the Discord, talk to me, let me know, and you'll have it. Outside of that, I appreciate you having listened. If you really wanted me to read it, just let me know. I probably still won't, but no, I mean you gotta. Let me see. Prophet was trained to break a 15-year silence to speak to Africa and the world when he was convinced that Afroscope is a highly serious-minded and uncompromisingly African organ. Dang, that looks like it's interesting, but I think. All right, whatever. We'll do it live. Okay, we'll read it next. All right. So 14 Steps to African Unity. We're going to discuss Cheikh A Diop next time. I can't do it right now. I just heard my son wake up. But I appreciate you listening. Hopefully you appreciate it as well. If you do appreciate it, make sure that you either drop a like, that you subscribe, and that you hit me up with some of these purchases for this book of power. I've been talking about it a lot. You might have rolled your eyes a couple of times, but you have to understand that if we're serious about building Africa and giving to Africa and making sure that Africa succeeds and has success, we have to have literature that reflects our principles. And for me, that literature would be the one that I wrote, that I can tell you does in fact address all these needs for unity, and it does it in 3 terms, but I explain it over a large, massive book that I don't think you should be without. So thank you so much. I appreciate your listening and your patronage, and I guess I'm not finished. I thought this was the end of it, but we're gonna do the appendix with this interview, but until we do, definitely subscribe, get yourself a book, and I'll hear from you in the next one. Shem Em Hotep. I go in peace.